Jumalang, hello everyone. Hi. Welcome to the Sound on Siren podcast. I am your host, Imbali.
And I'm Kitu.
And yeah, we're happy to have you back. I have the giggles this morning, apparently. Before we jump into it, remember that Sound on Siren is a podcast where we fortify ourselves from the inside out. So if you're listening on Apple or you're listening on Spotify, follow us. Might as well leave a review and a comment or a question. If you're on YouTube, please click the subscribe button. Just join us. Join the page. Join the family. See what amazing struggle to make stuff that I have for y'all this year. Awesome.
Follow Sound on Siren on Instagram.
Yes, follow Sound on Siren podcast, I think, on Instagram. Absolutely. Cool. What a week.
You're telling me.
What a week.
You're telling me.
What a week. So we'll start there. Start nice and soft.
Okay.
How was your week? How was your week?
Very long, very busy. I worked on Monday, which I don't usually work Mondays. And then I also worked on Saturday, and I don't usually work Saturdays. So quite full on.
Yeah.
I did take a day off in the middle of the week, but obviously when you're at work, the days they're long. And then when you're at home, the days they're gone.
They're gone.
So that was the shortest day of my week. Was the day when I was off, and I can't quite understand where the day went. But it was a nice day. So it was a long week. It was a long week,
Yeah.
and work continues to be full on, which is, ooh, it's not ideal. But
Is this
anyway,
your season of full on at work usually?
no,
Okay.
our
So
season
it's just
of
like a
full on
bonus
usually
full on.
starts circa June, like
So
end
in the
of
summer.
May. Yeah.
Okay.
Like summer is our peak season because it's
Yeah.
also Pride
Yeah.
season.
And
But
y'all
not this
travel for
year.
Pride. You go all over
I
the
mean,
place.
some of my colleagues will, but I won't because of my role this year. So when I
Okay.
first started my role, yeah, I definitely was one of the folks who went around the province. But now my role doesn't do that at all, really. So a few of my colleagues will go, but I won't unless it's something like in Burnaby or Surrey or whatever. Then they might ask for some staff coverage.
Yeah.
But if I can avoid it, honestly, I will.
Fair.
Because my actual weekday
Yeah.
has a lot to do. So and as much as the overtime can be delicious, it will have to be worth it.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
That's fair. Are you finding that it's worth it so far? Because you did 2 days of overtime. Will that be
We'll
worth
see
it?
when the paycheck comes,
Okay.
innit?
Okay.
It's always when the paycheck
Because
comes.
it's time and a half, right? Or is that
Yeah,
uncertain?
it's time and a half. It could even be double time on the weekend.
Oh wow, okay. Double time is cool. Nice.
Depends on the circumstances of like why the overtime is, but it could be up to double time.
Wow.
We'll see. And also it won't even come on this paycheck. It'll come on my
Next
one.
obviously.
So
Because this one we've already submitted timesheets. We've already popped it in.
Exactly. And they have like what they can approve, but then they still have to put in actuals. So definitely what was approved was lower than the actual time. So it definitely also, it's fine.
Damn.
I'm fine.
Damn.
At least if it's coming in that next paycheck, not this one, it's
Yeah.
going to be the end of the month paycheck, which is great, which means I can actually pocket some money from that paycheck that does not belong to me, but belongs to my bills.
Yep.
Yeah.
That money that belongs to the apartment.
Yep.
The money that belongs to
the insurance, the
yeah.
groceries, the
your phone
hydro bill, the
yeah.
phone bill, heavy on the phone bill. Ooh.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi bill.
Exactly.
Which we'll talk about at some point in this weekend because I figured out how to potentially change it.
We should change it.
And get us better Wi-Fi. Damn, so on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate your week then?
4.
We're low. Okay.
I just feel like it's
That's
just
fair.
also like it's the way I'm feeling now at the end of the week where I feel that I have little to no energy. That will be the marker of like just how necessarily bad or good the week was.
Fair.
You know, because there's some weeks that work can be like intense and full on, but when you get to the weekend, you still feel energized somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also once again, Vancouver. The rain is also, I feel like, contributing to my somber mood. Yeah,
It absolutely
for
is.
sure.
The rain and not having our chairs. It's driving me crazy.
I mean, the chairs are finally coming.
It's driving me crazy.
The chairs are coming.
It's driving me crazy.
You need to make a plan for the other chair, though.
The plan for the other chair is easy.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just gonna do something. Sorry, building manager. Anyway, my week was all right.
Okay.
What did I do this week? Went to work. Was a struggle. Actually, no. Actually, this week was a struggle. This week was a big struggle. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, wait, what happened? No, this week was a big struggle at work. Very emotional work things. Yeah, very emotional work things like being like a supervisor or something and having to manage your own things at work and then also like manage other people's emotions as well. Is a lot, especially when it is emotional time. So Pisces, you're in there.
Yeah.
You're in it. You're in it. I feel very draped in emotion. It's very, very weird. It was tough for me to get into clothes. I could get up and take a shower. I could get up, put my face on, but then to actually get dressed for work
Yeah.
was a pain. Sat on my bed
Ish.
periodically for like 15 minutes, pushed it to like 20 minutes, and I was like, I just have to get dressed and go. Just get dressed and go.
At least you give yourself enough time to. If I had those feelings, I don't give myself enough time in between waking up and needing to leave the house to sit down for 15 minutes. No, you kind of just have timed it to where you have to wake up, make bed, shower, like right to the last second.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if one step is quicker than the other, then it means, oh, you can like have some toast or something like of the sort. But don't have enough time to really allow my brain to get caught up in that. I feel like I can't do it.
Fair.
Unless I wake up and I'm like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Then I kind of just have to go.
Fair. No, it was tough. It was tough. But we made it. We went to work all the days of work.
You did.
Which was cool. Did a lot of planning for the pod, which is great. Yeah, like today's episode, as you can see, lots of papers. It's gonna be dense.
Oh. But
yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate my week a 5. Yeah, it was crap, but I survived it. So that's where the other 5 is coming from.
Right down the middle.
That's redeeming it. Yeah, otherwise it would be like a 1. But the fact that I survived it would be great. It was great.
Hectic.
So, we're going to go into the second segment, which is called Siren Sounds. And this is the segment where we break into songs. So today is very nostalgic, anecdotally way of breaking into song.
Okay.
My first question is, what genre did your mom listen to the most? And has that influenced the genre that you like to listen to as well?
Ooh. The most. This is hard because my mom had a CD collection that got stolen.
Okay.
Before I started living with her.
Oh.
So I feel like there's lots of music that I know my mother loves and listened to a lot prior to me living with my mom and my brother. But by the time I got into their dynamic, there was a handful of CDs, and my mom kind of kept it that way for the remainder of
the
time.
time. Okay.
I feel like it's that like annoyance of, you know what, I don't ever want to accumulate all this stuff again if people are just going to come into your home and take it.
Yeah.
But in terms of like what I remember being the most listened to, it's neo soul, I would say, probably. And maybe evenly matched is like South African jazz type R&B vibes. Like my mom loved Lira, that was a big thing. Judith Sepuma was like big, and yeah, that Soul in My Mind album, triple platinum in our house.
and my
Triple applying.
mind. Let love and joy be my friends. Give me peace with no end. No, Libra.
No, that album is incredible.
Honey, I know your voice is not what it used to be, but
She
girl,
had a stroke, you know?
yes,
And she like properly learned how to speak again and all this. That's like wild to me.
yes.
But yeah, so there was lots of Lira, Jutsu Puma, what's her name? I just had it on the tip of my tongue and now it's gone. Ledambulu was a big presence in our house. So yeah, I would say between the Jills and the Ericas and the India Aries, there was also the South African sound that
Yeah.
was like very jazzy, soul-y as well.
Okay.
And that I would say were the most listened to. And I love that music a lot myself as well. So definitely influenced.
Okay.
My preferences or tastes with music. And obviously you then go on to get older and you find your own things that you
Yeah.
like and enjoy. But my family members are cool. Like I was influenced by the things that they like because I think they're cool people and they like cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice. My mom listened to gospel music.
Right.
A lot of gospel music. A lot of good gospel music, but a lot of gospel music. My dad is the one who is like, hip with it. He listened to all sorts of music. When I say all sorts of music, like all sorts of music that he could get his hands on, my dad was listening to. But the most I would say was South African jazz or African jazz.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of jazz and a lot of like loungy music, like
Okay.
a lot
Yeah.
of like house, jazz, chill kind of music. Very, very interesting, like genre. I don't know if there is a name for it. That type of music. What is it like? Soul house?
Perhaps there's like Afro soul. There's a lot of
Mm,
things. There's even like smooth jazz, which is different from like jazz people do Teddy G or whatever those folks
yeah.
are. Your dad probably liked a few shows on the radio that would have been like a good mixture of those things. Like I think Metro had one on Sundays that
Yes.
was very good.
Yeah.
My mom used to love the African music Sunday thing on 702.
Oh, no,
They
I don't
used
know what
to,
that is.
it's a talk radio show, so like
Okay.
a radio station. So if you don't generally listen to 702 because it's 90%, 95% talk radio,
Yeah.
serious pieces, think pieces. My mom loved it. Oh my God, 702 still rings up in my mom, my aunt's car. They just love serious things sometimes. But on Sundays, that was the only time they used to play music. And there was this host who, I think his show was something from like 4 to 8 or something like that.
Okay.
And he used to do just like African music. So that was also where my mom in our house, that would have been the time when we were listening to music from other parts of the continent, you know? So that's where I got my introduction to a lot of Senegalese, Malian music.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of just very good shows. If you're in South Africa and you don't know, check out those shows.
702. Hopefully it's
But
still
tell your dad
hopefully it's still
he might.
pumping.
It's still going. I know that your dad might
Okay.
enjoy that show. If he ever wants to give it a listen, if he likes all kinds of music, it's a real good show.
Yeah, I'll let him know,
Yeah.
definitely. And that's obviously influenced me and the type of music that I listen to. But also I think I had a huge influence from my siblings. The type of music that my siblings listened to, which came out of influence of the type of music that my dad listened to mostly.
Yeah.
Because although at home we would listen to music when you're cleaning, doing that Sunday spring cleaning or whatever, doing your Saturday homework or whatever, or doing homework after every day when you come back home, we were listening to something anywhere from like the Mariah Careys, the Whitney Houstons, we were listening to Freshly Ground, we were listening to Bongo Muffin, we were listening to what's that what are those white bands in the US called, like
Which ones?
All American Rejects, My Chemical Romance. We
What the emo? Come on.
we were literally like everywhere. When I say all kinds of music, we are in all kinds of music type.
But the 2000s
family.
was like an embarrassment of riches with music. And so, I mean, even still today, I would say there's a lot of really, really good music. I just feel like in the 2000s, there was a lot of like sounds changing, sounds coming up and becoming more mainstream.
Yeah.
That if you were a young person in the 2000s and early 2010s, you would have heard a lot of bad music, but so much good music as well.
I see what you're saying now. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. No, definitely. So we're gonna move into the next segment. This segment's called Chatterbox, and we're gonna talk about something that I think is from the lost footage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So let's talk metrosexual.
Okay, what about it?
Okay. So for the people out there who might not know what the term metrosexual means, I'll read the definition that you get when you Google it from Oxford.
It's in
So-
Oxford? Oh God.
So as a noun, there's just wait. So this is the noun definition of it, relating to or denoting men who live in urban areas and enjoy shopping, fashion, and similar interests traditionally associated with women or gay men.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So denoting men, so straight men, right? Who
Right.
live in these urban areas, who then do these behaviors or engage in activities that are traditionally associated with activities that only women or gay men participate in. That's what that definition
Right.
in Oxford is saying. Okay. So, and some of these activities are obviously shopping, fashion, similar interests. So, a man who shops, a man who likes fashion
Right.
is metrosexual and
According
is
to this
leaning,
definition.
according to this definition, and is leaning into women or gay men activities.
Business.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So before I get your opinion, we're gonna give a little bit more context because I was like, that's a wild definition. So some more context according to obviously the internet. The term metrosexual was coined in 1994 by British journalist Mark Simpson in an article for The Independent. So he wrote that oh no, sorry. Yeah, in an article for The Independent. So he was just writing about, fashion, culture at the time, and then he used this term metrosexual. So metrosexual is a portmanteau, so it's a combination of two words. It's a combination of metropolitan and heterosexual.
Right.
That's where metrosexual comes from, and is a term for a man who is especially meticulous about his personal style, grooming, and appearance. It is often used to refer to heterosexual men who are perceived to be effeminate rather than strictly adhering to stereotypical masculinity standards. Nevertheless, the term is generally ambiguous on gender and sexual orientation of a man. It can apply to cisgender or transgender men, and it can apply to heterosexual, gay, or bisexual men.
Okay.
Okay? So this metrosexual man, this guy says, so therefore this means that this metrosexual man has clearly taken himself as his own love object and pleasure as his sexual preference.
What? Say that again?
Yes, so the metrosexual man
Yeah.
has clearly taken himself as his own love object
Okay.
and pleasure as his sexual preference.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
This is not what metrosexual ended up being.
Okay.
It's not how it was used.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So I'll read more afterwards, but what do you think thus far of this term metrosexual?
It's older than I thought it was.
Okay. How recent did you think it came out?
I thought maybe it was like a 04 type thing
Oh, really?
or something like that. Yeah, not 94.
Interesting.
Just because I heavily associated with the BuzzFeed era, like peak BuzzFeed.
Fair.
So circa like 2014, 13 time or era, I would say.
Okay.
What else about it? That last thing that you said, where it was, what is it? Taking himself on as
His
his
own
love
love object.
object and pleasure
As
as
his
his
sexual
sexual
preference.
preference. What a sentence. I think for a lot of cishet men in general, they are their own love objects, actually, metropolitan or not. And I think it's a cool concept to think of it if it's like in its pure or like initial iteration.
Yeah.
I do think there's something interesting in thinking about somebody, a deep commitment to cultivating a sense of like who you are externally. That's cool. I don't necessarily think that we had to come up with a whole word for it because it's men, but you know, that kind of tracks for men,
Yeah.
particularly cishet men, with wanting their own word that feels like a good word or whatever for them to kind of feel like it's okay to like fashion.
Yeah, like a non-feminine
And to like having
word.
to get waxed or whatever that looks like. And for them having a word, I feel like the word comes out of a place of very much that, where particularly because again, this metropolitan thing, this is a very American thing. I feel like metrosexual, not necessarily American, but a very Western thing, where there's also this desire to really separate the experiences of folks who are not in urban centers to folks who are in urban centers. So I think it's also like the metrosexual is kind of in opposition to the lumberjack, for example, this kind of like pure man who like lives in the, you know, does the woodwork and doesn't really care about fashion or whatever that looks
doesn't care about like a lot
how
of
he
types of
looks or grooming or all those things. So I think it's also
the
this
one who doesn't wash his legs.
oh, the metrosexual doesn't wash his legs. I promise you, the metrosexual also doesn't bathe. So it's, I think there's some of this also that speaks to a particular kind of city culture that you see as a much bigger thing, I think, in the Western world than you would other places in the world.
Fair.
Where most people, even if they are in urban centers, for a lot of people, they might have moved to urban centers. They might be like first or second generation living in an urban center in their family. But also there isn't this idea that like living in the city intrinsically gives you like a different types of expectations or things. Like you could in theory still be a very non-metrosexual person living in an urban center.
Yes,
which I think
absolutely.
is true obviously as well for North America and other parts of the Western world. But I do think let me stop blaming Americans. I do think there's an obsession with like codifying or categorizing also types of people, types of expressions. And with men, there's definitely, particularly with cishet men, there's definitely this desire to preserve kind of things that are masculine and masculinity to, I mean, which is, it makes sense for patriarchy. So to whatever extent they can, even if it means that you come up with words for men who like fashion and grooming, which you just don't need to do.
Yeah.
And also because these spaces are still, some of these things are a contradiction. Like, oh, this man is considered more effeminate because he's more into fashion. Somehow, though, fashion is still a very, very male space in terms of like high fashion. And if we think of who are the creative directors of the biggest houses in the world, a lot of them are cis men. Yes, a lot of queer men are in fashion. I would definitely say that. But I still think that while clothes and the fashion market is significantly marketed more towards femme people and women, in terms of like also the volume of clothes that exist out there, I do think that high fashion and this idea of a man who's really into fashion is something that, for it being called effeminate, doesn't sit well with me, because I feel like the history of fashion is very much entangled with men and cishet men in particular as well, particularly high fashion. So I'm not buying it. I feel like I'm just not buying it.
Fair.
Know? I'm just not buying it. And yeah, metrosexual also, I just feel like I associated with them, you know, the white guys who had the quiffs and the like super tight skinny jeans with the like pattern scotch shirts and
Yes.
waistcoats.
Yes.
And maybe they kept a little mustache or whatever that was. But I just associated with a particular kind of look because I do think in the 2010s it became associated with a look, not necessarily with this idea of a heterosexual man who lives in the city who is obsessed with fashion
Yes.
and grooming. I
It
think
became its own fashion
it was like,
sense.
yeah, its own
Yeah.
fashion thing. It was men in cities, but it was also
Its own
a particular
fashion.
kind of fashion presentation, which
Yeah.
meant actually a lot of men who were into high fashion wouldn't have been considered metrosexual.
And I think even in the fashion sense of it all, also had this allure of like some clinging, like a metrosexual person isn't afraid of showing off their body as well. So
Yeah.
they would wear quote unquote risque items, somebody who might wear a tight bodice, that maybe might reveal a little nipple or whatever, but I'm still a man, but it's just that you can see my nipple through my
Remember the
shirt.
V-necks
You
that
know
all the
what I'm
people
saying?
were going to the club with? The
Yes,
deep
yes.
V of the 2010s? Ooh, y'all terrorized us with that V-neck. Yarra goed, man.
No, but you actually hit the nail on this kind of next element of what I was doing the research on, is this idea of labeling and titling. And you even spoke about the lumberjacks.
Yeah.
So, Thomas Eric Chris, and from what I gleaned on social media, is that this person is a writer of sorts, a cultural commentator of sorts, but also wants to remain mysterious. So I think his bio says, "I'm not here," or something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, so Thomas Eric Chris links the term metrosexual to today's masculine archetypal language, likening it to the term looksmaxxing alpha male. Right? So that's what
Wow.
the youngins are calling it, right?
Looksmaxxing?
Yeah, somebody who's you're looksmaxxing alpha male. Don't forget the alpha male part, because you can't just be a look maxing beta male, because then what? You're being what type of male? Like very, very weird. Or a muscle guy. Or a muscle gay. Or muscle guy. I don't know if
I
I
mean, both
misspelled
things are
that.
true.
Yeah.
There are muscle gays out there.
So then also noting the parallels in media identity marketing and consumerism, which is exactly what we were saying, that it's all been a agenda of that marketing, fashion, consumerism, and obviously the change and shift of culture. So there's certain terms that replace, substitute, or counter the term metrosexual, and you hit one already. It's called a lumbersexual.
I remember this.
So a lumbersexual came out in 2016, 2017, this term, I think, in media, fashion, and online, describing a type of male aesthetics that uses outdoor gear for urban aesthetics versus the function.
Yeah, of course.
So a lumbersexual is somebody who dresses in lumberjack gear,
The flannel, it's the
fashion
jeans,
sense,
it's the Carhartts,
but doesn't
everything.
actually know how to chop wood for nothing.
I mean, because they're living in an urban center.
Yes. Yes. Another one's called retrosexual.
Oh, this is what's his name? Jadena.
Is a retrosexual?
I would say probably.
Oh.
Is it men who wear like a retro aesthetic?
No, it's meant anti or pre-metrosexual sense. So when you're retrosexual, it's not that you're metrosexual. You're like, I guess maybe, yeah, I guess maybe.
You would dress kind of like what?
I think you would dress not in the metrosexual sense, like whatever the masculine view was prior to metrosexual coming out. So whatever the fashion sense of the time prior to metrosexual getting in the mix, or that fashion idea of metrosexual
How
getting in
long
the mix.
prior? There's a lot
It doesn't
pre-metrosexual.
say.
So yeah,
It doesn't
so
say.
people who dress like times before the 90s then.
Yeah, I would say
yeah.
so. The next one is ubersexual. And no, it has nothing to do with Uber driving. Ubersexual, a man who exhibits both traditional masculine qualities and a caring, compassionate nature, often seen as a modern, well-rounded man.
This is so bizarre. Like, why are they untangling compassion and niceness from masculinity. Like, that's crazy. What are they
That is
ascribing to masculinity that they
mental.
feel they need to make a word for a man who's both masculine, but he's also nice and kind?
You're ubersexual.
That's weird.
That's very
like
weird.
like masculinity is not around behavioral or even moral, but obviously now they've ascribed certain kind of
Yeah.
values, morality, things to masculinity that maybe are not the most positive, to the point that they feel they have to distinguish.
Yes.
But oh my
Themselves.
god,
This is very reminiscent for me of those white women with the bracelets who are like, we're the different type of white women who didn't vote for Trump. Anyway, it's very much giving ubersexual vibes.
okay.
So that's one. Another one is spornosexual.
Okay.
Okay, so spornosexual. This is a combination of sports and porn. Sexual. So cultivating an athletic body as an object of desire and showing it off on social networks, accumulating sexual partners. So this is somebody like Ronaldo, for example,
Okay.
right? Not only is he a professional sports player,
He's also
but
a rapist.
he's also a sex icon.
Right.
He's also a sex whatever. As I guess this object. He's a spornosexual. Is a somebody who cultivates that physical sex appeal, and also is into sports. Guys, men are crazy.
So if someone is an athlete
Mhm.
and they have their body because they're a professional athlete,
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily automatically make them a pornosexual unless they
No, I think
cultivate, like,
it's
unless they share
yes.
their body on social media.
Yeah, unless they're kind of putting forth that like I'm a sex vixen, I'm a sex whatever, and they're in
Right.
GQ or whatever.
And so what if
those
somebody is
things
not
are.
an athlete but they have a fit body, and then they also do that? Are they porno because
No,
they're
they have
fit?
to have the sport. They have to have the sport.
So if this person is fit, as in like looks like an athlete but isn't an athlete,
Yeah,
and is this like their body is part of their brand or
Yeah.
sexual whatever, they're not a pornosexual?
no, because they are not in they're not in sports,
Oh, okay.
right? So it has to be sports related. Then because, right, this is what you were saying, is that separation of identity and self, and this kind of idea of fragmenting oneself. The next one is called a technosexual. And you can obviously guess what that would be, right? A term that circulated in media, fashion, and online outlets of the 2000s to describe a male that possesses a strong aesthetic sense and a love of technology.
What is an aesthetic sense of technology? What is an aesthetic sense of technology?
So I don't know. Maybe for all the people who think, I don't know, who's a tech person, whoever a tech person
So
is,
Mark
if you think
Zuckerberg.
that they're sexy.
Mark
No, but then
Zuckerberg,
they have to have
an aesthetic of technology.
possess a
Isn't
strong
that
they have to possess a strong aesthetic sense and a love of technology. So they have to be desirable. They have to be sexy. It's like a sexy nerd.
Oh, okay.
Essentially, that's what it is, a sexy nerd.
Nerds aren't necessarily technology people.
But this is a sexy tech nerd.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what a technosexual is. So maybe Mark Zuckerberg is not, because I don't find that man attractive at all.
Okay. So maybe
Um,
maybe Andrew Garfield in The Social Network.
Maybe
Perhaps.
These are the terms that relate to metrosexuality, but really for me relate to this fragmenting, like we were saying, of men. Like a man cannot be made up of all of these things together. You are man A or man B or man C or man D or man E or man F or man G, but you can't be like man, right? Which is obviously something that they've cultivated in the society. So
That's wild. I didn't
found
know
that
about some of
very
these words.
fascinating.
That's actually like so wild. I already thought metrosexual didn't need to exist. I didn't realize there were like much worse things than metrosexual that existed
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
That bothers me, I'm not gonna lie. Like, that's actually like so troubling.
Yeah.
It's also just Western ideology around what is feminine, what is masculine. Like, why is a man shopping something that is actually like strange?
Because where do you get your clothes if
Also
you're not
because
shopping? Where do you get your clothes if you're not shopping? Every man shops to get their clothes, no?
Everybody shops. But yes, every man shops. And also, men been caring about shopping and what they're wearing and booty boop boop boop. Like, I don't understand it.
That's
I feel
mad.
quite sad for men.
Yeah.
I mean, also
But I
I
wonder,
don't, because this is, again, like we said, it's their own doing.
but I wonder then how much of this is kind of, I mean, the two people who I mentioned here, the guy who is
Who created
yeah, who
metrosexual,
created the
and
word
then the one who
metrosexual,
did
and then the other guy, they're
Lumber.
both white. And so I wonder how much of this was in relation to the white community and like white people, because then a large part of culture and lifestyle for Black folks has included an element of caring about the way that you look, you present, whether it was the environment that forced you to care and forced you to look a certain particular way, or it was that sense of seeing yourself, representing yourself, beauty, inward, outward, whatever the case might
All
be.
these things.
Right? All these things. They were always present for folks of color and like for Black people in particular. So then would that, for Black men, would they have, would, what I'm trying to ask is like, would there have been a higher chance of a Black man being noted as metrosexual than a white man? And what are the implications of those?
People of color can't be any of these things.
Mm.
People of color can't be any of these things, because any iteration, if you look up metrosexual, go to Google Images, it's going to be white people. Like, all of these things. The other thing that isn't being said in this, when we are talking about the man in an urban center who likes to shop, the man who likes to do the lumberjack, these are all white things, which is to say, not necessarily that I think they're white, but also that these are terms that are ascribed to white men. You know, Black men don't even really get to be lumberjacks. Black men just get called country. If you're a Black man who wears flannel, you're just seen as like being very country, not necessarily lumbersexual or whatever the case is. So I'd actually say not just Black folks, but all folks of color wouldn't, for many people, be able to fit in these categories. And also, really culturally, why would they want to, or how would
Yeah.
it make sense? Like you said, for many people, already culturally, you would have been told to care about the way that you look.
Yeah.
Men shopping in Black communities, or like men being fashionistas, has kind of like always been there.
Yeah, it's a
In as much
norm,
as the
yeah.
girls are stunting, the men were stunting. That's kind of like how it went. And if we think of like fashion iconography in Black spaces, we'll talk to Blackness because we're Black, but obviously there's lots for other folks of color.
Yeah.
You know, like I would say in particular for brown folks, there's lots of culture, both brown as in Indigenous, South America, stuff like that, and brown as in also South Asia as well, where I think lots of folks culturally as well, you are taught to care about the way that you look. And also brown Middle Eastern. Oh my gosh. But with Blackness, you definitely almost, I feel like almost entirely, there is a lot put into grooming, first of
Yeah.
all, for everybody, and personal grooming and style or expression,
Yeah.
and fashion as that. Yeah, and it always has been. So these things wouldn't, a Black man who loves shopping is not considered effeminate. It's just another Black man. They love to shop, honey.
Yeah.
They love to shop. It's just another thing. So we can't ascribe some of these things to them anyway.
No.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting thing to talk about. I was gonna ask another question, but I think we went so nice and like involved into it. I don't want to make this episode 3 hours long. So we finished that segment, which is really nice. We're gonna move on to the next segment called the Pele Pele, which is where I read a thread that I found or something fascinating that I wanted to share from the Webby. And today's thread is, what is your word or words that if someone uses them on a video or in a conversation, you realize that they're not the person that you need to converse with or you need to hear this from?
Ooh.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have one or you want to think a bit?
I'll think a bit.
Okay,
But
cool.
what are people saying out there?
So folks are saying, someone said high value or low value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. High value woman, man. Nope. I'm not having a conversation with you. We are not kin.
Someone said high functioning and low functioning. Not as much for
Not as
me.
much for me, because I do think there is some aspect for people, particularly when we talk about neurodivergence, with function and the high function and low function and executive function. So I do think there's that terminology is useful in particular contexts.
Yeah.
I think people use them in the wrong way all the
Yeah.
time, but I wouldn't necessarily automatically have my heckles raised from high function or low functioning.
Okay. Next is female.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. These females, when you're a female, leave me alone.
A random debate. Based. So the word based, or the words "it's not that deep," and any 4C slander.
Okay.
Um, as a man.
And as a woman. And as a woman. Sorry. Because also the people who are making as a woman content generally tend to be these femininity, whatever type
Mm,
people who are talking about how to be this woman, a that
the right,
woman,
the right
whatever
woman.
the fuck.
Yeah, the best woman.
Which if you're African, it feels like it's especially worse, because I feel like that content right now from African influencers or Africans with big platforms is becoming a thing.
It's mad though. It's mad. The blacks.
Oh yeah, no way.
Too sensitive.
Absolutely.
Boss babe.
No, I think that's funny. I think Boss Babe can be funny, and I think if you're using Boss Babe in an ironic, satirical way, I'm here for it. If you're saying Boss Babe in like a serious way, then maybe I'm like, ooh. But like Boss Babe, I think can be very funny.
Okay. All I think about when I hear Boss Babe now is Boss Baby. That movie.
I never watched that movie.
Mm.
I never watched that movie.
Very wild. Anyway, any movies portraying white anything are wild. And we've let it go for too long, folks. We've let it go for way too long. We're still out here watching all white people content. I will never forgive myself for that. I did it the other day. Never forgive myself for that. Feminine energy. All lives matter, obviously.
Obviously.
Just lose weight.
Yikes. Big no. I would say with the Just Lose Weight one, for me, a marker, particularly with, which I haven't been on them in a couple years, but when I was on dating apps, a big one for me around this thing was I want to be with somebody who's very active and takes care of themselves. I feel was very coded into I want someone who's thin.
Yes.
So if I saw that on anybody's profile,
Yeah.
it's a no for me.
Yeah.
This idea of like, just say also I don't date fat people. But you can't say that, right? Because that's wild. Exactly.
Yeah.
But people, I feel like there's lots of coded language around people expressing fat phobic sentiments. And I think, yeah, I want somebody who's very active or takes care of themselves is very coded in that. And I think there's also an added layer of when you say take care of yourself around grooming expectations for women in particular.
And also take care of yourself around the seriousness, like how seriously you're taking your life or how much you value your life. I think sometimes that also has a connotation to that. It's like if somebody takes care of themselves, then like you're saying that if you want to be skinny or want to be this healthy that is skinny, you care about your children, you care about your future, you care about your partner because you want to live long enough, for your partner. I had a partner who told me, who asked me when they were like, go to the gym, and he said, what did he say to me? He said, don't you want to live for me?
That's so crazy to me. You couldn't say that to me. You couldn't say that to me. And also because I know way too many thin people who are so unhealthy that I could never think of thinness as intrinsically a thing that is an indicator of health. And I know way too many people who are not thin, who are very active and very fit.
Yeah.
And very healthy as well and take care of themselves to an extreme even, I might say, in terms of like just how much a person will go to nourish their bodies and all these things. But obviously, we all have multiple reasons into like genetically. I don't know that I can be thin. Like, that's another thing that, again,
Yeah.
with epigenetics, some of us are not going to have the genetics that will allow for thinness. Not that I would desire it, but I've seen way too many thin people who are unhealthy for me to think of thinness as taking care of yourself. And I think honestly, people would just kind of be like that. Like, I only want to date thin people because I think it's an
Yeah.
attract instead of like thinness being ascribed all these other qualities which aren't necessarily true for thinness, can be really troubling. And I think it's also part of the sentiment that allows thin people to feel like they can move and talk any which way to people because
Yeah.
they're thin.
Yeah.
Oh
The next one is Grand Rising. Men are logical and women are emotional.
God.
Body count, the term body count.
Throw it in the toilet. Throw it in the toilet. At your
Um,
big age, you're asking people for their body count. I can't believe some of the debates that happen on the internet around body count. If you ever watch
it's
Back Chat, or
not
was it Black Chat? Was it Black Chat or Back Chat? I want to say it was. Did you watch it?
Black Chatable Corner.
Yeah, but like Esther, there were these Black British YouTubers, or it was this Black
Oh
British YouTube channel where
no.
they used to have these kinds of like, they would have people come and have debates, and usually it was like the girls on one side, the boys on one side,
Oh no,
and
I
they
don't
would
think so.
have debates. Woo! You had to be there. Hi, 2016. Yeah,
Was it
they
mad?
had a they
I
had a
can
very they had a
imagine.
very like popular, like somewhat viral in the Black Twitter-esque vibes about body count,
Yeah.
because yeah, there was an episode where they were talking about it, and men who had high body counts, whatever that is, but like, people who had slept with 50 plus people
Yeah.
were saying they would never be with a woman who'd had more than 3 sexual partners or something like that. Like, just like wild
Stupid.
things.
Stupid.
Wild things.
You want somebody to give you something that you couldn't give them. You
Oh,
want
and
them
also
to
I
give
feel
you
like a lot of men were also just, they were actually like being very modest with that. I think a lot of people want virgins.
yeah.
A lot of men just want to marry a virgin.
And they don't want to marry a virgin because of the whole virginity thing. They want to marry a virgin because of what they have done to women during sex in the past, how they have thought about women or their sexual partners in the past, the way that they've degraded them, denigrated them, the way that they've used them as objects in some regard. That's why they don't want people who have had multiple sexual partners, because they think that slap you around, call you a bitch, call you a whore, whatever, even if you like it, it's fun. But for them, when they think about marriage and the person that they're going to be with for the rest of their life, they're thinking a softer type of sex, or a more like, that's just me who has the power over you only, and nobody else has grabbed your neck like this, or whatever the
I would
case
say
is.
the ownership is a big thing. This
Mm,
idea that I'm your one and only.
mm,
Um, and this idea again that somebody, you don't need to see what is out there, because like, I will be the one, I'm be the first to do anything to you. I think it's a big thing around like ownership, particularly like if you're if you're a romance girly like me, you'll see a lot of it emerge in romance literature as well. This thing of like, even you'll find sometimes, I feel like authors are trying to find this line also, because lots of women hate women. So when you read romance, you'll read a lot of text or like things written by women, but you can tell this person hates women,
yeah.
where they'll also try to find ways now to, the main character, she won't be a virgin. And also there's lots we can say about virginity in there. I don't necessarily believe in virginity, but like, okay,
Yeah.
let's say a woman she's not a virgin, she's had a few sexual partners, but they'll try and find a way in which she hasn't engaged, where she's still somewhat innocent or hasn't had lots of sexual experience, even if she's had sexual partners. So
Mm.
generally it will kind of cap at that she's had like 3 or to 5, up to between 3 to 5 sexual partners before. Almost always it's going to be a thing of like, either this partner she's had have never enjoyed oral sex, so either she hasn't ever given oral sex or like given somebody a blowjob in a cis
Yeah.
het dynamic, and that's a big thing when they're like, am I the first person to do this? Or every time they've gotten head from a man, it was never good, and the man in the book is going to be the
It's
first
gonna be the
person
first
who's
one
going to
to
give
give
them
them
this
a
good head,
head or
or
even an
the first person to give them an
orgasm.
orgasm.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, this idea of being the first for somebody.
Yeah.
And I think also for men, a lot of men know that they're not particularly good at sex. And there's something that's very appealing about an inexperienced partner who doesn't have the same benchmarks for pleasure and enjoyment, where you kind of get to dictate that this is good sex.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
this is how sex goes, this is good sex. And live out your pornographic fantasy with somebody who doesn't necessarily have things to measure you against. Which is not to say that all inexperienced people are gonna have these things. Like there's many folks out there. Inexperience doesn't necessarily mean you don't know what you want. You are unfamiliar with pleasure or things like that. That's not necessarily true anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think definitely there's a big part of like ownership and like them also having this awareness that they get to set particular benchmarks
Yes,
for themselves
definitely.
with somebody who's more inexperienced.
Definitely.
And like you said as well, this idea that there's single man sex and then there's married man sex, which is like
stupid.
again, that means the rest of us are out there in the world being terrorized by men's pornographic fantasies if you have sex with men.
Yeah.
Like you're just continuously being terrorized by the things men want to do in the bedroom that are just like, if you want to have pornographic sex or live out a pornographic fantasy, please get a sex worker.
Please.
Please get a professional.
Please.
Get a professional because you're not gonna come here and think this is Brazzers. Like seriously.
No.
Like
No.
yeah.
Anyway, the term provider, baby mama or baby daddy.
Well, I don't understand that one.
So like when somebody calls someone the baby mama, so like this is my baby mama, or like I have a baby. I think they don't like that it's referred to as baby mama, maybe because of the connotation of society's idea of baby mamas and the drama and stuff like that. Instead of calling it the mother of my children, the father of my children.
But I feel like that's just again another way people have tried to say that AAVE is somehow like bad language. I don't really subscribe to that. I think like there's lots of Black Americans who use that terminology and it has nothing to do about somebody's moral character or the association with baby mamas or baby fathers or baby daddies, whatever. It is just the vocabulary that people use. And I think there's lots of AAVE and other forms of vocabulary that in particular prevalent and used by Black folks that have now become like, ooh, we don't want to do that. And I don't agree with that. I think there's actually lots of demonization of AAV, and I think that's one of those things. Because how is baby daddy different from saying father of my child? It's the same thing.
That's mad.
It's the same thing. If you have a horrible baby daddy, you would say this is my ain't shit baby daddy.
Yeah.
But if that's just person is the father of your child, that's your baby daddy. I mean, that is your baby mama and you're a baby mama and all these things. I don't think it certainly wasn't the word was it didn't come out of this thing of like being a bad thing.
No.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that I agree with that.
This creator online, his name is San M Cho, something like that. I'm saying it wrong, probably. But he talks a lot about AVE, but like dialect in general, especially pertaining to the US, and like the South and stuff like that, and how these types of like um connotations are attached to AAVE words that just mean like basic everyday things, but then also in how AAVE or even in what is it called? Is it Creole? I think some type of
Creole. Yep.
As well, how people would shorten words, but not that they were shortening it because they're lazy or whatever the case is. That's just how in the dialect you spoke as well. So he also talks a lot about like the idea of being literate or illiterate or smart or good talking and all of this kind of stuff as well.
So yeah, that is kind of where I would live with that particular terminology. And even with the term like woke as well, again, that's AAVE that's been co-opted and now people kind of want to use woke as some kind of as if it's some kind of slur, which is to say like there's too much woke culture or woke this. And if somebody is not Black and is using woke in a context to try to evoke some sense of like, this is a really bad thing, you've lost me. You've lost me because A, you're using AAVE and you got no business doing that. And B, that's not what woke is.
Yeah.
That's not what woke is. That's not what woke means. People are using woke and they're saying it and they don't really know what woke means. And so you miss me with that.
Leave me out of that.
And for some people, they might put woke on their list of like, what words did you do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's again, it's to me signals a kind of which if we get to the foundations of it, it's just a very racist thing, I think,
No,
ultimately.
absolutely.
Which isn't to say like Black folks can also engage in things that are discriminatory against other Black people. So this
Yes.
is a thing that Black people are also not absolved from as well.
No, absolutely. So one says the word vibrations.
Oh
High
yeah, high
vibrations, low
vibration.
vibrations.
Remember when people say that? High vibration meal? They were like, this is very
Yeah,
high.
low vibration me. I never really got into that.
That is so
I think I
funny.
saw that trend or that whatever viral whatever at the tail end of it.
Mm.
I was like just seeing it right at the end of it. But this low vibrational meal when they're talking, especially when they're talking about like food around Christmas, around American Thanksgiving and stuff like that, and like a full plate of food, you know, but like typical Southern food, for example, where you have your mac and cheese and you'll have your greens, like collard greens, and you have your
That's
chicken in
soul
the
food,
split. Sorry,
right?
soul food.
Yeah.
Um, and they were calling obviously soul food as low vibrational food, but obviously Black people universally don't take that thing seriously. So then people were just obviously co-opting that term and then turning it into a joke. It's really funny.
It was really funny time on the internet.
Um, what about you? Do you think of any?
Um, I mean, I already said a couple. I'm trying to see what else. Oh, particularly in academic contexts, if I hear just to be devil's advocate or just to play devil's
Oh yeah,
advocate.
yeah. That one.
Ooh
That one.
wee! The
That
devil
one.
doesn't need advocates.
Mm-mm.
So yeah,
No, that one is a big one.
that's a big
That one's
one.
a big one.
Let me think, what else? Oh, I think you see this a lot in nonprofit, this kind of like this kind of performative like I hear you, but you know, realistically we have to be
Ugh.
you don't hear me.
No.
So let's not say that. Let's not say
I hear
that.
you.
I think it's very similar to instead of people just giving an apology, them being like, I can understand why you would feel that way.
Mm, that one is gone. Yeah. Yeah.
Just apologize. Because again, it's this thing of
I'm
like, I
sorry.
didn't
I'm sorry
intend
you
or whatever.
feel this way. I'm sorry that
That's not an
this thing has affected
apology.
you like this.
It's them being like, you are going through your own
Yeah.
things, but I
I'm
don't
sorry
think I did
you have a
anything
problem.
wrong.
I'm sorry you have an
Um,
issue with this.
so that's a big thing. Doesn't necessarily mean I'll stop talking to the person, but it does signal to me that like, okay, so there is a fundamental misunderstanding in the context of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
particularly if it's around apologizing. If I feel like there needs to be an apology said and it's like, I'm sorry you feel that way or anything along those lines, then I'm just going to be like, okay, so I'm not getting an apology from this person. And some contexts, you just have to swallow that, right? Like at work, you just have to swallow that. If your manager is not apologizing, they're kind of not
They're not
apologizing.
apologizing. Yeah.
And maybe you have the kind of manager where you can also have some conversations about that, you know, but maybe also you don't want to have those conversations at that particular time. So I think that's one. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of the ones that you
yeah,
mentioned are definitely some of mine as well. I think anything that has to do for me with working out, now that I'm thinking about it, like anybody who's any, I'm sorry, but any befores and afters, and I know it's body related,
I
I
hate that
just
shit.
can't.
I
I
can't
just
believe we're still
can't.
doing that
I just
content.
can't anymore.
I mean, now we're in that
I
particular
just
moment
can't anymore.
again, very recession core. We're going back to like people are losing a lot of weight
The
and
flash of
it's a
like,
big thing.
I know these workouts for this, or like anytime there's those ads on YouTube, and I'm trying YouTube Premium right now. I'm not paying for it, but this 30 days free. This is my second day on it. It's giving.
I
The
know they
ads
gave
are
me one. They gave me one
crazy.
for a month and then they took it. I might have to swallow the L and just pay for YouTube
The
Premium.
ads are
But it's like
mad.
$20.
But yeah, it's crazy. I
That's
hate
crazy.
the protein. You should be eating protein.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of like blocking of particular phrases, words, things. And if you're a content creator and then I see you lose weight and now you want to sell a workout plan to me, you're never gonna see me again. You're never gonna see me again.
Before this
Anyway,
episode becomes 3 hours long, child.
yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sound on Siren podcast. You can follow us on social media. On Instagram, we are Sound on Siren Podcast. On TikTok, we're also Sound on Siren Pod. You can find the podcast if you're listening or watching on the other platforms. So you can watch us on YouTube, you can listen on Apple and on Spotify as well. Follow, subscribe, have a merry time, share with your friends, add your input as well in the comments. And yeah, let us know how your week was whenever this episode comes out. But until next time, friends,